All right, yo, this is Jason Trost, writer, director, JTRO, and so many other things on not just FP1, but FP2, 3, and 4. Now, something I just want to get out of the way right out of the gate is I know some people will be coming onto this commentary trying to find a bunch of evidence of how much of an awful racist and misogynist and etc. that I am. But I have to sadly remind you that this movie is completely a parody and a satire. Like, to give you some background, I grew up in a small white trash town this movie is based upon, and this is kind of me shining a mirror on my experience growing up as a disabled kid with these cool kids in the early 2000s who would use all of this speech and vernacular, and sadly, yes, they were all white. And this movie is 100% just a parody on white ghetto culture, which was prevalent in the early 2000s, as well as movies from the 80s and 90s where they had this weird, awful misogyny that was there for no reason. They had all this weird racism in it and it was never really answered. And I just wanted to show my opinion on all of that, and this was kind of my viewpoint of how ridiculous and stupid all of that was. So naturally, I used Beat Revelation because it was one of the dumbest things I thought or I could think of that could portray how silly all this was. And to me, this is obviously a joke because this dancing game is so stupid. How could somebody treat this so seriously and this be serious? But I have to remind people that this is a joke and I am on your side. I'm also making fun of racist white people and horrible misogynist white men, and this is kind of my take and piss take on their entire world. Great, and now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let's get into the making of this movie. Now, I know with most commentaries, people kind of be like, hey, that's Art Sue, I met him here, and then we go into those background stories, which are great, but I've done other commentaries, and you can go find those. But I think with this, what I want to do is I want to kind of educate people on how to make a very low budget movie look like something more. Like, basically, how to make a low budget movie look like a bigger movie when you're 21 years old with no resources. So, this is all just my dad's barn. And I knew that going into the movie, and I'm a very firm believer in you should only write things you know you have. Don't write for what you hope to find on the day. And that being said, like all of these actors in this movie, or in any of my movies really, are people I already know somehow in my life. I don't just write a part for someone and be like, oh God, I hope I find someone who can be this person. I'm specifically writing something for someone. So that's why it's always difficult when people ask me, how do I audition for your movies? I'm like, well, you don't really, because I kind of write for what I know. That's always what I do, and that's my strength, I think. And this barn is one of those things. My dad was building a barn, and it looked pretty ghetto because it was unfinished for like 12 years or something ridiculous. And he has all this crazy special effects machinery and, engines and blah, 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 what have you. So I was like, okay, well, this kind of looks like the post apocalypse. Let's run with it. And that's where this movie's set. Like, post apocalypse, white trash town. Got it. I've got that lying around everywhere on the property. I can just drag over a random hunk of machinery from here to there, and we've got some set design. Now, another thing, how to fill up like a room like this with extras. Like, obviously, we have no money, so we can't afford really any extras, and we don't have that many friends. So, if you're eagle eyed, you can look back and forth, and these are actually the same extras in both of our coverage. They're just dressed in different costumes. Like, if you look back and forth, you'll see the same exact people dressed completely different. And since they're soft and kind of out of focus in the background, you don't really notice unless I'm telling you. But now you'll go through, like, Where's Waldo and probably look for everyone. And another thing here, to try to make something look not as low budget as it is long lens is always your friend when you're shooting. You get close up, everything's blurry and out of focus in the background, looks way more cinematic. Also, fill your sets with atmospheric smoke. Having a fog machine is great. Like, we have some more advanced fog machines from time to time because my dad's a special effect coordinator, but I've also, in a pinch, used like the $20 ones you get from party stores. It really helps out. Like, having, especially when you're shooting digital, which we all are now, having that fog kind of fills up the frame and makes it more filmic and makes it softer because, we've got these things like 4K and 8K and all these things now, but the sharper it gets, generally the faker and cheaper it looks. It's a weird conundrum, and all you do in post is try to soften things up. This movie, luckily, we shot in 1080, so we didn't have to do as much of that. And again, we have, yeah, these are all the same extras everywhere flying around here. And I think we actually shot a lot of this movie on not a Steadicam, but it was like some little cheap white trash gimbal version of something like back, like, this is like 15 years ago or whatever. And, where there's a will, there's a way. We've watched this with Steadicam people. I'm like, oh, that's some great Steadicam. We're like, yeah, that's funny. We used a cheap little fakie, and, looks the same. And LWE here, this is Lee Valmassey, who, again, like, I didn't just write a part hoping I'd find somebody who could do this role. Lee was one of my best friends growing up, and I'd known him forever, and we'd done little short films before, even with these characters, and I knew he could do this, and we just amped it up more, and him and I would just sit down and we'd watch all the old 80s movies with these horrible misogynistic bad guys, and we're like, okay, let's just do a conglomerate of, like, toss all of those into the blender and see what we can do. Now, these dance pads, like, again, like, Brian Goddard here, he could actually dance, and so could I, but, like, most of the actors can't do dance, so I'd have to be, like, the stunt legs for them. And we were playing to a fake game because we had to make the graphics on the screen, and you kind of play to that live, which was nice, but doing this silently if you want sound is always, quite a thing. And I know I've gotten a lot of critiques over the years where it's like, the dancing isn't crazy enough, and I'm like, guys, that's just the joke. Look, I was part of the dance culture growing up. I played all the games. It's very good. We're playing in the hard modes here. Dance does look ridiculous and kind of silly and quite tame, even when you see it in real life. You just have these kids holding the bars and their feet move kind of fast, and, like, they're gassed, they're out of shape. Not out of shape, like, they're in incredible shape, but, like, they're beat up, but it's like, it looks really stupid. And that was why I used this, is because I wanted these people who act so thug and so tough, and my way to make fun of them was like, it's over that? I remember, like, the original short we made, I think it made a little more sense because there was, like, this thug talk back and forth, and they're like, oh man, this is definitely like one of those cheap, like, fighting movies from back in the day, and then you pull out to reveal the dance machine. It was like, oh my god, I get the joke now. And I think that kind of helped people realize this was a joke. I don't know if we had that aha moment in this, and, maybe we needed it.
Thanks, bro.
And I guess now this is going to bring us to another question. People listening to this, I get a lot of flack. A lot of times people are like, why is he wearing an eye patch? All these sort of things. I'm like, well, I wear an eye patch in real life because I'm actually blind in my right eye, like, I'm actually disabled. But there's been a strong, I guess, contingent of people online that think I'm just wearing it for a fashion statement, and I was like, where the hell is this coming from? Why would you just think that? That's an odd thing. And then I realized that on IMDb, in the trivia, some joker at some point decided they would just go on and add that Jason Trost only wears an eye patch as a fashion statement in real life, and I'm like, those sons of bitches. And this is my point being, IMDb, unless you're a big movie, no matter who you are, you can pretty much go and add whatever the hell you want in trivia on that thing. So when you are making a low-budget movie, be sure to check that thing, because I've had to, check these movies over the years, and you got to go on there and definitely get some things deleted over time where you're like, who is doing this? But I didn't really think anyone ever looked at those things or cared, but this is one in particular that's come to haunt me for years. The amount of shit I get from people online that I'm faking the eye patch, it's not real, and I'm like, why in God's name in real life would I walk around with an eye patch over my right eye? If you are blind in the right eye and you try to walk around and do normal things, you would realize very quickly that it's never something you'd want to just fake on purpose, unless, you want to get a lot of bruises on your right shoulder all the time and, never be able to have an acting career. And, the whole reason I ended up becoming a writer and director and, filmmaker, editor, all the things above, is I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid, but then I very quickly realized growing up in a film family, that the way the film business is, they kind of hate different, and the fact that I was going to have to always have an eye patch, that was never something that was ever going to work. So I had to learn how to become a filmmaker to then be able to put myself and cast myself in movies. And then once I realized that wasn't enough later on down the road, because even if I can make the movies, the corporate side comes in and they're like, yeah, we can't have you in the movie, it's too weird, the eye patch is too weird, it's distracting. And then they're like, oh, we have to explain it. And I'm just like, what, people can't just be blind? That's not like a thing? And like, it's a part of diversity that hasn't really caught up yet, like normalizing the fact that people in real life are disabled, and they should kind of be celebrated the same way everyone else is on screen. But in a weird turn of events, like, I never would have become a filmmaker had I not been disabled. So it's one of those things that you're kind of like, well, it did suck that it happened, but it led me to here today, and now here I am doing a commentary on a franchise of films I made because of that, and that's pretty awesome. I really like the way the foundation here looks, and low budget wise, what we did to get all this extra junk that my dad didn't just have lying around his property is we went to the local thrift stores in town, and a lot of them have junk they can't sell, and we're like, can we take this stuff and put it in the movie? And they're like, yeah, you can take whatever you want in that section, you know, like the section they can't sell. The only deal is you can't bring it back. So that was kind of our thing, and I suggest if you're in this point, become friends with thrift stores, and there is junk they can't sell, and they will just kind of like hand off to you, and you take it by the truckload, and then you fill up your trash movie, but you know, write a movie around trash, and you'll always be able to find set design. Also, a lot of these lights aren't movie lights in here. It's all different work lights and different color temperatures, which kind of make this all look really cool. And I do suggest to get creative with lighting. Like, there's so many different things you can get, like even just like fluorescence from the hardware store, or you can get, you know, the work lights. There's so many different color temperatures you can get, and they're quite cheap. And like, I think you just kind of have to get over, when you're making a low budget movie, don't try to make a $300 million movie. It's never going to work and you're going to fail. Try to make something that looks unique and has a sort of character. In order to do that, it has to have mistakes, it has to be gritty, it has to kind of have no rules, and then it kind of become, but as long as you're cohesive with that, I think you can really be successful in creating your own little world and something that looks quite neat. I'm really happy that eye patch technology has come as far as it has. I mean, particularly by me. I mean, when you have a ridiculous hairstyle like this, it's really hard to have a strapped eye patch over your hair without totally screwing it up. So over time I developed, as you'll see in the FP movies, cutting off the straps and double stick taping an eye patch to my, you know, ocular cavity, as it were, and it's just a lot more comfortable to wear. It's a lot easier to, you know, gives me headaches. Now here we have my dad sawing a tree down, and he would joke, "Oh, it's a $25,000 shot." But it's another thing where I didn't write a scene in there that, you know, someone sawing a tree without knowing that could happen. My dad was early on, he's like, I got this tree that's dead, we gotta cut it down. I was like, all right, I guess we'll throw that in the movie. And like, my dad has tractors, and my dad has all these trucks. Like, all this stuff are things that are on my dad's property deeper in. So I was like, well, Jatro's obviously, like, you know, a lumberjack now, because my dad has all the things to fake that. And including this very interesting ways you'll see later of me carrying away a chainsaw, where I was like, I've never seen anyone do that before. And he's like, that's how the experts do it. And I was like, I really question that, Dad, and I don't think that is. But because my dad is from this town, I'm like, well, I guess someone from the FP would definitely hold a chainsaw that way. So I just kind of ran with it. And, you know, we had to think practically with our sets. Like, here you'll see there's these trailers and things in the background. Everything's practical, because my dad's like, I need firewood for the winter, so yeah, sure, we can shoot up there, and but all the wood you're sawing is going to go in that trailer, and it's going down to the house where all the wood's going to be stored for the winter. So we had to make that deal with him to do this, and that's really funny. That's actually LW in the background there, throwing around logs. And again, like, everyone, that's another thing. When you're making these low-budget movies, when you have someone who's just an actor or just this or that, it's kind of hard, because everyone has to multitask in a way if you want to make something like this, because, you know, there's a reason they make big budget movies with like 1,000+ people. There's a lot of different jobs that need to be done. So when you're making something small, you kind of have to shake hands with the fact that each one of you are going to be doing 20 different things. And if people don't want to do that, which is completely fine, it's probably better to not have them involved in the movie. I learned very quickly on this movie, and it's something I implemented in every movie after this, is I don't care about hiring the person who's the best at their job. I want to hire the person who wants to be there the most, because they're going to do the best job. I've had plenty of people that are aspiring this or that go above and beyond to do really good work, and I think that's another reason why these movies that I make look like they're so much more than they are, is everyone's really trying and they really care. Because when you have someone who's really good at their job but they don't care, and they're kind of reminding everyone on set how much they don't care and don't want to be there, it can become a disaster really fast, and it's kind of a cancer that spreads to the set, and then everyone's like, well, I don't want to be here either, and then it's a total mess. I don't recommend it. Get the person who wants to be there the most. That's who you should hire. And quite a bit of funny movie trivia here. This is one of the first Blumhouse movies. Those are both the producers from Paranormal Activity, and I remember when they were making Paranormal Activity 2, for some reason they decided to pick up this movie, and yeah, I have technically made a Blumhouse movie. Which I guess is another good lesson for up and coming filmmakers is sometimes you don't necessarily want the biggest producers in the world. You want the producers that are the most excited about your movie, and because sometimes having big producers who aren't that excited about your movie can lead to interesting roadblocks, let's say. So this is Art here. He didn't know how to drive a stick shift. Now, the one thing I have to tell every actor, learn how to drive a stick shift, because most of the cars in movies are old cars or cool cars or whatever it is, but they're always stick shift, they're always manual, so you need to know how to drive a stick shift, but a lot of actors don't, and it leads to issues like this. On the day, I had to jump in front of the car because Art couldn't stop it because he couldn't drive a stick shift, even with LWEs in the back seat trying to teach him and tell him, like, hit the shift now, do this, hit the clutch. And yeah, he almost rolled off the mountain, as you see there. Also, don't shoot on a road that goes straight off a cliff with an actor who can't drive a stick shift. And, I learned that the hard way, but don't be me in this situation and don't allow that to happen, because we got lucky, but you might not. We got a bunch of flies buzzing around this scene, which is always fun. Like, I mean, you can see a lot of them when you're looking at it, but like when you were there on the day, there was a lot of them, and it's one of those things where I think you just kind of have to lean into it when those things happen on the day. Like, instead of trying to be like, we're gonna shut down for an hour or two until the flies go away, which is never gonna happen on a low budget movie. Like, lean into it, add it into the sound design, make it part of your world, and just go with it. Because on these movies, like, it's more important to capture, I think, the story and the performances and what's going on than worry about, oh, there's flies. Or I've been on big budget movies where a director will shut down the shoot for 4 hours because he doesn't like the doorknob in the background that's really like soft and out of focus. And it's like, these things don't matter. Like, what matters is you're telling a story and you're leading the audience along and you're getting your day done, especially on a low budget movie. You don't have time to play around. You already don't have enough time to shoot the movie. So when there's flies, fuck it, just shoot. Now, coming up here, we're going to BLT's house. Another thing, I wrote this house this particular way because my friend Dylan had, his parents had a house right there on the main stretch of, FP proper. And I was like, oh, here we go. It's my brother's car, who's BLT's car in the movie. And like, we owned all these things. This is now inside of my parents' house. You can see my sister there in the fridge, and even me, but whatevs. And is, again, it's always just, what do we have lying around, let's write it for that. And again, like, we didn't have a lot to make this house kind of feel as FP as we wanted, so we just blasted as much smoke in there as possible to try to hide the lack of proper set design. And I think it really worked. And those happy accidents that happen on the day here, we this projector only projected upside down for some reason. Like, those are actually people like beating. We have, BLT here watching old beat footage, which is me and I think one of my brother's friends. And yeah, it just was upside down the day, and we're like, you know what? Fuck it. This guy's a weirdo. He's, kind of falling out, like, kind of represents his world. Why not? Just go with it. We could have spent like an hour or two of production time wasting trying to figure out how to get the project upwards, but they're happy accidents. You just got to roll with them when you're making a weird movie like this. When you're trying to make everything too perfect, I think it just becomes content and gets lost in the void. And Tyler really did a great job in this movie. He was our production designer, and he was just a really good friend of ours. And he's since gone on to win an Emmy and work on shows like Barry and like big things like that. Some of which, like, mildly might have gotten the job in this movie because, this thing was kind of had some cult status with some of those bigger comedic actors out there. I worked as a crew member across so many different corporate things over the years, like bigger budget things, TV shows, movies, whatever, being special effects, art department, costume department, camera department, grip and electric. I've done so many things, and I've seen a lot of different stuff and learned a lot of what not to do, really. And I find over time, you have to realize when you're going to be a filmmaker on one of these things, there's two different types of filmmakers. Are you going to be a contractor, or are you an architect? And I mean that in the way of, do you want to make your own original things, or are you a contractor where somebody gives you a blueprint and you just go in and make exactly what they tell you? Because if you want to do that, you can be very successful and this and that, but you're never going to be very creative. Like, there is a whole contingent of filmmakers out there where they're essentially just cover bands, to where it's like, hey, we want a movie that looks and sounds just like this, and then you go and produce that, and that is a skill and it is a talent, but it's just something that's always kind of not done it for me creatively. I've always been more of the architect, where I like to cover new ground and make things you haven't seen before and do weirdo things and, bring them to life, these weird images in my head. But I think I wish I would have identified that earlier on, because I think I was definitely struggling with making this movie and some of the later ones, thinking I still wanted to be a contractor to a point, and I wish I would have just known I just want to be an architect and make my own weird things, and that's totally okay, and I don't want to do it the way, you know, the corporate system wants you to do it, which is totally fine, but it's better to learn that early on so you don't waste a lot of time and maintain some of your soul and just who you are as a person, because the corporate sector of the filmmaking can get pretty dark pretty fast. And with all of like these newspaper clippings and VFX and things like that in the movie, and a lot of the art, like I did myself because, yeah, sure, there's people out there that are a lot better at it than me and this and that and the other thing, but then it comes back to that thing like, they'd be doing it for free. When can they get to it? It's a favor job. Who knows? And my note for you, if you're making a small movie, is kind of learn how to do everything as much as you can. You don't have to be great at it, but even if you can kind of do it, it'll be done on the day in some capacity. Like, I learned how to do VFX over the years because I knew favor jobs of VFX take forever, and if you want to pay for VFX to be done quickly, it's quite expensive. And same thing with sound over the years, like recording sound, doing sound design, mixing. The more of that sort of thing you can learn, these are the things that always take forever when you're getting favor jobs, or if like you're paying someone, a favor rate. We call it mates rates in Australia. But, it's no fault of theirs because they have real jobs and they have to pay their mortgage and what have you. And like, trying to fit in your favor job is, it's quite tough. So the more you learn how to do yourself, the more you can amp up the budget of your movie, because I always find I don't want to abuse other people and crew members. I'll only abuse myself. Like, everyone's like, God, that sounds like so much work. And I'm like, yeah, it is, but I like to work. But the only person that's getting hurt is me. But I'm not even getting hurt because I really like it. You're always going to care more about what you're doing on your movie than someone you're getting to do it for a favor, because, they've got a whole bunch of other shit going on in their life. So if you do get the chance to do a lot of things yourself, I think you're going to be a lot happier with it. It's not like an ego vanity project thing. It's completely the opposite. It's just like, I just want to get this done and I don't want to abuse anyone else. So I'm just, doing the rest of the world a favor by only beating the shit out of me, which is another reason why I'm generally the main actor in my movies, because a lot of them require quite a bit from someone. If I was to ask someone, for free or cheap to come down, like just get the shit beaten out of them, like, you do with me in my movies, like, I wouldn't feel very good allowing that to happen. So I usually take the brunt of the damage. And I'm totally cool with doing that because I love doing this. I love acting. I love making movies, but I understand that, some people might not love it as much as me. So maybe be mindful of that. My sister Sarah really did a great job in the costumes in not just this movie, but all the FP movies that she worked on. She's just so great at turning garbage into pieces of fine art. Like, I just never quite know how she does it, but I'll generally, I'll give her some rough sketches or some ideas, and she's kind of like laughs off. She's like, yeah, that's cute. And then I give her a pile of trash, and then I come back in like a day or two, and she's created these just amazing pieces of artwork. Like, it's quite incredible, like what she does. Like, and that is another thing. If you don't have a lot of money for production design, make sure you have a great costume designer, because on low budget movies, I think a lot, your costume design becomes your production design, because you kind of don't know what you're going to come up against when you're guerrilla filmmaking and stealing locations and things like that. But if your costumes look great, just shoot a lot of things long lens, put them out of focus in the background, and you just kind of assume the movie looks great because your actors look great because they're in awesome costumes, and you kind of assume whatever's back there and out of focus, that probably looks great too. What's right in front of me looks good, so why not? And obviously, the other thing, if you don't have a lot of money, and even if you do have a very talented costume designer, don't write a movie about like astronauts or, deep sea divers or something where, wow, these costume pieces are going to cost a bunch of money. You kind of have to be loose with it and be like, I want something kind of like this. and then be loose with the idea that it might not be exactly what you had in your head, because your budget is going to push and pull you in the different directions that could be totally awesome and debatably cooler and more creative, but you're not going to get exactly what you initially thought, and that's totally okay, and it's all part of the process. Yeah, and this movie looks pretty good for, what we shot on. We shot in like the Canon XLH1, which is an HDV like 1080 camera from the way backs. I know a lot of people scoff at that sort of thing. Like, I see a lot of first-time filmmakers being obsessed, like, we have to have a red, we have to have an Alexa, or whatever else. And I can't stress enough, it's about what you put in front of the camera, not the camera you're using. Like, I feel like we've seen so many examples now of awesome movies being shot on iPhones or other crappy little cameras, crappy finger quotes, but they're prosumer cameras, and you can't scoff that off, because when you think about it, you're like, oh, my buddy has an Alexa, or my buddy has a Red, or whatever, and you don't think about, wow, even if that is free, which it usually isn't, because you usually have to pay for God knows what, the hard drives definitely aren't free, and that sort of footage takes up so much hard drive space that when pennies count in a movie, like spending an extra few grand on hard drives isn't really something you want to do at the end of the day. So I always suggest, if you with your first movie, find a good versatile camera, find something with good low light, something that's fast and easy, and it doesn't matter about the quality of the camera, because it kind of becomes negligible. Like, if you don't have something good to put in front of the camera, it doesn't matter how good the camera is. A lot of these crazy party sequences, like, at the Foundation in particular here, were based upon real life scenarios. Like, obviously we didn't go to like a foundation like this, but house parties in the mountains where like in high school, with these ridiculous characters of people that would say and do a lot of these things, and like verbatim, like 80% of the dialogue in this movie is probably things that I pulled and mildly tweaked from real life experiences. Like, the ghetto thug culture from an entirely white town was quite out of control up there, and so like all these things, like, they look ridiculous me watching them now, but it's just also kind of like a flashback for two reasons. Like, A, it was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was when we shot this. I was 21, so I don't feel like doing math at the moment, but also when I was in high school, being in these moments for real, it was quite a thing. And I remember my brother really wanted a naked woman in the movie for whatever reason back there, and it was one of those things where I'm like, well, I'm not going to write that unless we have it. And then it turned out my sister had a friend who was an up-and-coming porn star, so I was like, all right, well, I guess, Brandon, you can have your naked woman in the background now. So we did that, and that was that part of the movie, which, as you'll see with the next FP movies, none of that sort of attitude transferred on, thank God. And here with Snig, Brian Goddard, this was his first time acting in a movie, because he was just a funny guy in the mountain, one of our friends forever. We could tell when we shot the beginning sequence of the movie, he was doing great, but he was just, his nerves were worked up, it was hard, like, we could tell, like, this was just hard on him. He was really enjoying it, but I was like, how do we make this easier on him? How do we get him more confidence and bring him up? So we're like, what if in the year later moment, he had somehow broken his neck, and he's got this neck collar, and his jaw's all fucked up, and then he can kind of become like this crazy white trash Chewbacca, and they really leaned into it, and he fucking killed it. Like, it was, there's those moments when you're shooting a movie where you kind of have to just jump in and see what happens. I feel like there's three different parts of making a movie, and there's writing a script, which is basically like making an ingredients list if you're cooking, and you're just like, I know that if I throw all of this stuff in the blender, it's gonna make something good when I actually put it on the stove and start cooking it. And then, of course, when you're shooting, you start cooking, and as you know, when you're cooking, you've got all these ingredients, and the ingredient list looked great on paper, but at the day, you start smelling it, you're taste testing, and you're like, it's not quite what I thought it was going to be there, so you add a little bit more spice here, a little bit more of that there. I think it's very okay to change things on the day and not feel bad about it, because that's just kind of the process. And then, once it goes in the oven, that's post-production, and that's where the movie really comes to life, at least for me. They say you write the movie 3 times. It's like, you write it in pre-production when you write the script, you write it on the day when you're shooting it, and then you do the final draft in post, which is very, very true, because there's so many things, I don't care how good the script is, that are going to hit the cutting room floor. And the more movies you make, I think the better at writing you get, and you stop writing scenes that get deleted from the movies. And one thing I think in low-budget movies, one of the biggest problems I see when people will give me their script or this or that when they're making a new movie and it's like an up-and-coming filmmaker. My first note is always like, this thing cannot be over 90 pages. You got to cut this thing down. There's always like 120, 130 pages. Like, the quickest way to get your budget down in a low-budget movie is cut down the pages. Like, I know it's hard to edit yourself out, and you're like, this is important, that is important. It's either you cut it now or you cut it later, but you're just wasting money and time that could be spent on the things that are actually going to stay in the movie. So if there's ever something you can do, cut down your movie below 90 pages before you actually shoot it. Like, I have never shot a movie that is over 90 pages because I just know it's going to get cut out, and you're wasting time, you're wasting money, and it's making the rest of the movie suffer because that's all time and money that could have been spent on the things that are actually going to end up on screen. And yeah, around here we have all this production design stuff either from my dad's property, or it's like, these are all cars. Like, I think that was one of my cars back there. LWE's truck is my dad's truck. It's just whoever's car we had, that would just become the production design. In this world, a lot of times we have people just park their cars places like, hey, crew parking's here today, and that would be the production design for the set. And you kind of have to roll with that on these. Yeah, the foundation here has been the same in all 4 movies, which is quite funny to me that this is like the one iconic landmark of the FP movies that's made it all the way through the entire franchise. And coming up next here, we've got the 248 HQ, which is where, you know, BLT has this magical underground cave. And the reason I wrote that into the movie is because we were working on this movie. I think it was like Devil's Tomb or something. I was doing special effects with my dad, with Cuba Gooding Jr., and they had all these cave walls for the movie that they weren't going to use. And like, yeah, we're just going to junk them, because it'd shock you how much stuff goes in the trash after a movie. It's insane. It's actually part of the reason I do green screen movies now, because I just couldn't handle how much trash gets thrown away at the end of a movie. But all this stuff, like that metal door, those cave doors, these set walls here, they all came from that movie, because they were just going to junk it and throw away like these crazy, like, they're awesome set pieces, and they were throwing them away. They're going to the dumpsters, and we were just kind of like, can we bring a car trailer down and like have that? So then we took that, and then like I was like, oh man, 248 HQ could be a cave. This could be a whole thing. And then we're like, okay, we don't have an entrance, so what's cheap for an entrance? We're like, all right, let's rent some shipping containers, because those were really cheap to rent down the street. And we just kind of made those both our entryway into the cave set, but also like the structural wall for the cave set, so we didn't have to build too much like from the ground up, because, you know, our production design crew was Tyler and me. And we just, yeah, we built this whole thing. We got the cave walls, the roots that are just actual roots from nearby that we cut down and threw on the walls. And my dad had a tractor. We dug a moon pool there, and that was pretty much it. This all came from a Cuba Gooding Jr. movie and my dad's property of wonders. And the whole training montage, it's things where they're all things we had access to, obviously. Like, we had weight sets on the property or something. Yes, Jatro's lifting weights in this montage. And those metal beat pads back there, I've had those for, God, I don't know, since I was 19, a long time. We had those forever back when we made the first FP short that then led to getting this made. And they've just made their way through the entire franchise, actually, because I don't want to buy new beat pads, and they keep looking cooler every movie because we keep beating the shit out of them. And the TV in there, I think that's the exact same TV that's used at all of the beat matches in this movie, which I think we then ended up returning to Costco because they had that amazing return policy where if you buy any electronic, they'll take it back, no questions asked, and give you all your money back. So we were very careful and delicate with that TV. And yeah, this is just the behind my dad's property. There is these beautiful canyons where you can run around. So we're like, all right, well, go ahead and make that part of the training montage. And it's just, yeah, it's just being very mindful of using whatever you have and accentuating that. And viewers that are here that have already watched the entire FP franchise, this BEAT nonsense here also goes ahead with the quad force. Like, that is, those are the 4 elements that we have to use to save the world, essentially. So, I guess we were kind of laying the groundwork here in a way for future FP movies. Coming up, we have this thing, which is a white trash swimming pool, which I love, where you just, I've actually seen this and then do it on the mountain. You put a tarp in the back of a truck and you fill it up with water and you drive around. It's a swimming pool. And I was like, I can't believe that's real, but now I've seen it and I can't not let other people see it. And that's kind of what a lot of this movie is. Like, I'd love to take credit for a lot of the silly, like, ridiculous aspects, and I know a lot of people on the internet would also like to give me credit for it, but it's not necessarily the case. A lot of these things I saw, this was a very strange place to grow up as a teenager. There was a lot of strange things that happened, and I put it all into this franchise, and now my world is your world. Sorry, not sorry. And I can see me limping away there now, because during this movie, when you're doing all things like when you're working construction, you're working on sets, you're working on costumes, you're doing stunts, you're doing all different things, uh, it's kind of pretty easy to injure yourself. And I remember in this movie, I got at one point when sets, I got a nail through my foot. I broke my ankle on a stunt gone wrong earlier on in the movie, unfortunately. So I had to kind of keep doing the whole movie with a broken ankle. But luckily, the beat boots kind of worked like a cast. So I, got around that. And I was young. I still have a weird calcium deposit on that ankle that I've never really quite gotten checked out, but it's all good. Still works. And God, there was something else too. Yeah, like split my eyebrow open. Yeah, there was a lot of wear and tear. I don't think I've ever been as injured on a movie as I was with this one. This one was very Wild West. I learned this one was a big crash course in learning what to do and what not to do simultaneously the whole time. I definitely learned a lot of lessons and applied them in my future movies. This was the hardest movie I ever made by like a mile, like a very long shot. This was a very hard movie. Yeah, this was actually the thrift store, the name your own price thrift store, where we made the deal where we'd go into their back section and kind of grab all the things that they couldn't sell or didn't want to deal with because they would go to the dump and acquire a bunch of things, and then we would then take things that we wanted to use in the movie and then send it back to the dump. It was a very strange ecosystem, but we made it work, and it was very classic FP in fashion. One of the hard things that happened on this movie, and it happens all the time when you're an independent filmmaker, is that you get lots of notes and you get lots of people who don't understand, or they half look at something, they half look at your script, they half look at a rough cut of your movie, and they kind of just say, oh, here's some notes of what I think, and you should definitely change these. And then you have to realize, some notes are good. I like the notes when it's things like, hey, this doesn't make sense to me, why did this happen? But then you'll get the more sort of corporate notes, which are the notes I don't agree with, and I think you should try to stay away from, which they're the ones, and especially in today's day and age where every movie is kind of becoming the same thing and seeming like it was written by AI, most of the notes you're going to get on your movie are how do we make this movie more like other things we've already seen because that's more marketable. And it's like, oh, and to me, more forgettable. And I'm like, that's not going to do it for me. That note does not apply here. If it's a note about this doesn't make sense, you don't know why the character did this or that, we can talk about it, but just try not to listen to all the notes that you're going to get about, traditionally in a movie like this sort of thing doesn't happen. Like, whatever. It's also, I found out much too late that I don't like the movies that most people like. So why do I expect that I'm going to make movies that most people like? And the truth is, like, I'm not. I don't mind if people don't like it just on taste, but plot holes, listen to those. But if someone doesn't have the same taste as you, that's okay. But just it's knowing when to hold them and when to fold them on notes, and that applies to the scene coming up. There's going to be this beer run where we go on a run. We run in there and we grab the beer, which it's a true story that happened all the time in the FP. I would always hear people be like, because everyone's too young to drink, they'd be like, oh yeah, me and my buddy, we were there, and we'd run in, we'd grab it, we'd run out because it's 3 a.m. There's only one guy working there, and is he really going to chase you out in the night when you and your buddy is running and grab a case of beer? The answer is probably not. But this scene, it got chopped out of the movie early on, one of the first cuts, because I think like the first editor we had right at the time was like, it's not funny, it doesn't work, we need to get rid of it, like it's just this or that or the other thing. And then I came to the realization, it's like, it's not that it doesn't work, it's just this guy doesn't think it's funny, but I still think it's funny and I want it there, so we put it back in, and here we are. But I think basically, and speaking from experience here, that uh, be careful with the choices you make on your movies early on, because this is one of the few times you're going to get to make whatever the hell you want and be as true to yourself and your voice and make something that actually is you before it gets just strained and squeezed and corporatized out. And it's really cool, like looking back on something 20 years later almost and being like, oh yeah, we did that, we did whatever we wanted, that was great. There's plenty of times to, like, listen to the the voices in the boardroom down the road. But this is one time where it's like, listen to yourself. If you want it, put it in the movie. If you want your movie to be unique and be different, make the movie you want to make, not the movie you think you're supposed to make. So yeah, now coming up here, we've got we're going into Trailer Henge, and what I was talking about earlier, it's just the cast and crew, all like, hey, park your cars here, we need a parking lot scene. So everybody parked their car here to go to work, so we would have a set, because that's how it happens when you're making these low budget movies. And this was definitely something that Lee and I encountered in real life. We went out to the desert out in the 138 and went to a weird rave, and this whole thing is pretty much inspired word for word from that. And Clifton Collins here is somebody my brother knew and that I knew for a while. My brother did a movie with him, and so he for some reason came up and helped us out and did this scene. And I won't go too far into specifics, but if your actors want to have a couple drinks here and there, it's still easy to kind of corral them and get a good performance and all that and the other thing. But when it comes to other substances, you might want to just keep a watchful eye on what people are doing on set if you can, unless I guess you're in the scene and you're stuck in the backseat of the car and you can't really police what's going on outside of the car. But that's a whole different conversation for another day. And this has always been one of those things. We had to add a sound effect to try to make it work out. But if you're ever gonna give somebody a can of beer or like a case of beer like that, make sure you put some beers in it. For whatever reason, we had nothing in there to make that heavy, and it's always looked like it's empty to me. And no sound effect in the world is going to change that for me. I don't know if just because I know it, but make sure things have weight to them, because actors aren't the best at pretending that things are a different weight. Same for actors pretending with guns about recoil. They always overdo it and go way too much. That's why you want to get like those kind of gas operated guns or the airsoft guns that have like the blowback already on them, because it's nothing like seeing an actor like really exaggerate the recoil on a gun. It's quite funny. I mean, it's funny, like see it once or twice, but then do it the right way later. Now, this is Dove here, who was our triple deco 1K, and I was like, yeah, Dove, and again, someone else we knew, you're gonna have to be Russian on this, so show up and be Russian and see what happens. He shows up totally method. He was Russian all night, which it's a thing some actors do, and to each their own, I suppose, as long as it doesn't get in the way of anyone else. And I will say that kind of in relation to that, I know there's like a lot of directing books and things out there that'll tell you like you can pull a performance out of an actor and you can do all these things and you can blah blah blah. And then I've, over the course of doing about 10 films now, realized, and being an actor myself, it shouldn't be the director's job to teach an actor how to act on the day. And that's what a lot of that stuff kind of gets blurry on the edge of. An actor should show up and know how to act and how to do their job. Your job as a director should be to remind them where they are, what they have to do. Like, hey, in the scene right before this happens, so maybe you want to amp that up a little bit. Things like that. I shouldn't have to teach you how to act in general, because in the same way, like, do I have to teach the focus puller how to pull focus on the camera? No, he should show up to set and just know how to do that. Do I have to teach the grip how to, build a C-stand? No, because if I had to teach those things, you'd be fired. So just be wary of actors, and you'll know this in the casting, and if you're doing auditions or if you're doing read-throughs of the script, if it seems like you're going to have to teach them how to act, you should maybe look elsewhere before you start shooting the movie, because that problem only gets a lot worse on set. Yeah, now I remember on this set in particular, Trailer Henge, it was the hardest set in the movie to build by far, because at this point there were two different factions of the movie. There were the Hollywood types that, quote unquote, producing the movie, were down in LA and they'd go home to their comfy beds every night and all that. And then there was us, like the crew, up there building the sets and doing other things, so when people arrived there was something to shoot. So me and Tyler, the production designer, I remember we looked at this empty patch of dirt and we're like, wow, in 2 days there has to be a Trailer Henge here. How the hell are we going to do this? And it's just you and I. Somehow we did it, but it nearly broke us. I think this was definitely one of the moments where we bit off slightly more than we can chew. I mean, I think the set looks awesome, but it damn near killed us to put this one together. And going on with that, that whole, where there's a will, there's a way sort of mentality. This was back when they didn't really have cheap, like, good slow-mo prosumer cameras, so we didn't have slow motion capability with our camera. So we were just like, all right, screw it. Everyone kind of act like they're in slow-mo and we'll make it part of the drug trip sequence. And it's one of my favorite bits because it's just so bizarre and like who in their right mind would make people do slow-mo fake in a real movie? And we did it. Here it is, and that is kind of what drugs feel like. So why not? And God, yeah, shooting this at night was quite cold, and quite hard because when you're shooting a low-budget movie, you don't have like the warming tents and the jackets and the coats and all these things you get in the bigger movies. So I do recommend if you can get away from it on a low budget movie, maybe try to write the night shoots out. It's a lot harder to light and shoot because it's at night, but also because it can get quite cold, quite uncomfortable. Doing night shoots for like weeks on end can really mess with you like psychologically and your health. Stay away from it. Another reason that I like doing green screen now. No more night shoots, but yeah, at this point it was the shoot started really hot, and at this point in the shoot, as you can see, it's starting to snow and rain here. It was getting quite cold, so yeah, staying up all night and just the freezing cold and having to do this shit is just, it's not pleasant. Like, sure, it looks cool, but like when you're doing things for free or very cheap with your friends, just be mindful of how much torture you want to put them through. And this one, it was quite hard. I don't like to do this to my friends anymore. Night shoots I try to stay away from. It's not pleasant. Yeah, and a lot of this movie, it's so ridiculous. And people will ask me like, how do you do that? How do you direct or write like a comedy? And what I always tell them is I'm never directing it as if it is a comedy. I'm never, you know, to keep the joke. I hate when people do a joke and they're constantly winking at the camera. It's kind of like the Will Ferrell style, you might as well insert boink sound effect here. Like, which is a time and a place for, but I really like it when people don't break character, and that's the whole joke of these movies. So when I'm directing them, I always tell people I direct them the same way I would if we were directing a drama. It's always, okay, how do we make this better? How do we make this more serious? How do we make this more intense? And I find for me that creates the humor because the more ridiculous the scenario, the more real you treat it, the funnier it becomes because you're like, oh my god, I can't believe they're treating this very, very stupid situation this seriously. And this scene coming up right here with Art and I is a good thought about that because we treated this like, it might as well be a scene in a Braveheart or something for Art. Like, there's at no point where I'm like, Art, on the next take, can you just be a little bit funnier? Can you be funnier this time? It's like, that's never the case. It's like, Art, I really want to, I want to see some tears going. Like, this is really affecting you. Like, you almost lost your second, bro. Like, it's a whole thing. You got to go, like, you really got to go into it. And the more straight you play a joke, the funnier it is, I think, because you're also doing a better job at parodying the source material because you're making fun of it directly to its face, being like, I can do it even better than you, and that makes the joke funny, at least to me. And it's the very British style of like dry comedy that for some reason I grew up on. I've just always been a firm believer that if you have to explain the joke, it's no longer funny. And that's kind of the idea with the FP movies is I'm never going to explain to you that it's a joke, but you just kind of have to assume the whole movie is a joke, and every scene, every second, every moment, at least to me, is a joke. And that's why in the future FP movies, I put the 3 drink minimum warning at the front of it because it's basically like pull the stick out of your ass, take a joke, sit back, have fun. These movies are absurd. So sit back and laugh at all the things that I also think is stupid. And then we all get together and it's a litmus test where it's like, hey, we all think this thing is stupid and we can collectively laugh at how stupid these kind of tropes are in life and in movies. Isn't that fun? And I guess if all that wasn't enough, you've got this stupid TV in the background with all these things I made because I always see, in those medical movies, there's always these weird, impossible printouts going in the background. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to write a bunch of gibberish and bullshit like, scorpion sting, definite, and all these kind of things, which actually relates to when I did get bit by a scorpion in the outdoor shower during filming this movie, but that's a different story entirely. And it was fun taking some of those jokes and like reintroducing them in FP4 and some of the jargon on the computer in that one. That was fun. But yeah, I like background details. Like, there are so many background jokes in these movies because I like to make full worlds in these movies to where you can watch them several times and always pick up some other fine detail. I like movies being layered like that. And here, of course, we wrote a skeet shooter into the movie because my dad just has a skeet shooter that's legitimately his backyard, where we would shoot skeet when we were kids, and he has all these guns, so those are the guns we used, and that's why they were written into the movie. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written guns in a movie, because getting guns, like real ones that actually fire blanks, is quite an ordeal if you don't have access to them. And it's also quite dangerous. I think this is the last time I ever shot live rounds on a movie. You know, live rounds being blanks, just because I just don't like to deal with it. It's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of scary stuff that can happen, and I'm just not here for it. I'm here to have fun with my friends, not to kill people. And this moment here with KCDC, it's always funny to me because this is probably one of the truest scenes based upon the real life inspiration for KCDC, which was my friend Kyle, who loved ACDC, so we just called him KCDC, and thus KCDC was born. And everyone has that friend. I feel like with guys, there's like this, he pretends to be like the toxic masculinity around the boys, and all the boys get together, but then when it's just you and him, he's like very soft and tender, and he's like, I know how it is, and it's like very in touch with his feelings, this, that, and the other thing. And KCDC is kind of the personification of that. And also with Jatro in these movies, that was always kind of what I wanted to do with him, was that he's this guy who should be like the machismo, he looks like he could be like the toxic masculinity kind of guy in the movies, but he's just kind of confused because he's kind of like a rational person who has like feelings and emotions, but he's kind of thrust into being an action hero, and everyone around there kind of treats him like that, but he's kind of like, I'm just this guy, I don't know what's going on. But it's kind of how I felt my whole life, to where, especially when I was younger, you have to do all these things to kind of blend in with what people think, a guy should be, what a guy does. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm a guy too. And then one day you wake up and you're like, you know what? I am weird. I'm not a guy like that. Fuck it, I'm going my own way. But there is a time, I think, especially in like your high school and early 20s, where a lot of guys can fall trapped to like trying to purvey, the image of what a guy is supposed to be. And I'm so glad I am older now and don't have to deal with any of that shit. Yeah, this was great because another one of those moments where you kind of have to roll with the punches when you're on set, because in the script originally, this was supposed to just be like an actual living room, like she had a house and this, that, and the other thing, and then we realized that there was this empty lot like that my friend Dylan's dad also owned, and we're like, well, what if it's just an exterior living room? And then we just kind of made like this little empty lot, like the exterior house, which is kind of a vibe up there in the FP proper. Like you'll see that quite a bit. It's one of those moments you're like, man, I should have thought about this beforehand. But it was kind of when, when they say, what is it, necessity is the mother of all invention or whatever. But this was one of those moments where we just kind of created one of our favorite sets in the movie purely because we had to on the day and didn't really know what else to do. And instead of being like, oh no, we're screwed, you just kind of do it. And I think that's one of the most fun parts of making independent movies for me, is the puzzle and the equation of it. You show up, you realize what you want to do is completely not going to happen, and then you sit there for a second, you're like, count to 5, and you're like, okay, well, I guess what are we going to do now? And you just kind of figure it out, and it's really fun to kind of just solve that puzzle with your friends every day, at least to me. So one thing coming up in the training montage here that I get a lot of questions about is what's going on with the people trying to puke or putting their finger down their throats game. It's actually something from when I was in high school at bus stops in the FP, because we were a bunch of kids living in the mountains and I guess they had nothing better to do. These kids would actually sit there and be like, who can throw up the fastest, and would put their finger down their throat and just try to see who could throw up the fastest while you wait for the bus. And I was like, this is just wrong and awful on so many levels, but also, kind of funny watching these dipshits do this. So I was like, what better way to show that the bad guys are bad and that they suck than have them doing this thing that was one of the strangest, stupidest things I've ever seen someone do in my life. So here we go, and Lee, as he does, likes to do things for real, so him and Brian Goddard decided to actually play the game for real, and that was Lee really winning that game, and I thought that was pretty intense. I'm not sure if I would have done that myself, but Lee's very committed to being the shittiest bad guy he can, and he killed it. Here we're just firing real guns at targets my dad really has on his property back there. There was a conversation of, are we going to fake this or are we not? And I'm like, well, I guess we'll just shoot real targets and stand back. You know, those things you do in your first movie that you might not necessarily do on the later ones, but you know, it's the Wild West out there when you're making those movies. Oh, I guess that's a. It's funny. That is a Fraser Mountain High School sweater that I'm wearing there. That's funny. That's where I went to high school a lot of years ago. Here we've got KCDC talking about spaghetti and waffle sandwiches, which I know originally Draft House Films, they really leaned into that and thought that was hysterical. Everybody loved the spaghetti waffle sandwich. Like, where did you make this up? Where did you get the idea for this? I'm like, it's just literally something I used to eat when I was in high school because all I would have in the cupboard sometimes when you live up in the mountains, you know, your dad goes to Costco like once a month and shops, whatever, and you're like, oh, what do I have left? Well, I got waffles and I got spaghettios. Let's see what happens. And now it's an iconic food of choice in the FP, apparently. So something you want to be careful of in a sequence like this is when you're doing a fight scene with someone with a bug zapper is one thing, but then my dad he put squibs on there, which, you know, sparks that, or, you know, a tiny explosive that goes off when they hit you. Is that I had my hair was just drenched. That mullet was drenched in hairspray, and if you know, hairspray of course is flammable, and I've got, you know, an entire bucket of hairspray on top of my head. So when those things hit, I was like, can you just please hit me as far away from my hair as possible, because there was a genuine concern that I was going to light on fire in my head, and I'm glad that didn't happen, but it felt like it got close a couple times. That haircut that was generally me just going into the barber with a picture of Kurt Russell from Big Trouble in Little China and being like, this please, and that's what I walked out with. It was, you know, very interesting to maintain that during the shoot of the movie. And this is Lacey here, who is now, you know, one of the Stacy, Lacey, Macy trio, and she also is wearing a medical boot. And, you know, the kind of untold story is that her and Brian Goddard's character were in some sort of car crash or something within that year, and they're both permanently injured from that and wearing casts forever from it. So at least that's how we rationalized it, and it was quite funny. But Rachel was great because she really owned that medical boot and was rocking it all over the place. This is one of those scenes that's funny because, you know, going back to my, you know, your actors can have a couple drinks method of directing, you know, on occasion. This was Lee's 21st birthday, I think, and Caitlin there decided to go to Don's Liquor Mart down the street and buy a bunch of drinks and get him drunk at lunch or whatever. And then this scene happened, and, you know, we definitely got through it. Lee killed it. He's crazy, but he's, you know, definitely all animated and puffed up, and, you know, we leaned into it. It worked. You know, actors, if you're gonna have a few sneaky drinks when you're on set working, if you're at lunch or whatever, it is what it is. It's a low budget movie. I get it. You're not being paid very much, etc. Just let your directors know so we can calibrate for how we need to handle you throughout the rest of our day to get it done. And, you know, it's one of those things. Sometimes these curveballs come at you, acts of God, as they say, come at you left and right on a low-budget movie, and you just kind of roll with it and see how you can make it to the end of your day. And that's the magic of it. And this is great. Coming up, I walk away here, and Jeff Howell, Forklift, like, are all around. He's in every one of the movies as background characters, and he's also our on-set photographer for the entire franchise, and just all-around buddy and rad dude. He's always giving me shit because there's so much walking in these movies from J-Tro, and I always love when these scenes come up because I can always see him just laughing and shaking his head, because every movie, just J-Tro walking a substantially long distance, and I joke that every movie I try to make the walking longer and longer just for him. This was back in a time when you actually had to stay up at night and wait for the moon, a full moon, to come up and get that kind of shot. Now you just, you know, put a visual moon up there, and it's super easy effect to do. And how far we've come in these last 2 decades of making independent movies. This idea here that we would put plastic over the beep beep machine at night, as if anyone in this world would care if something happened, or that you could even make anything happen. It's funny to me because I think that was actually just us putting plastic over the TV at night so we could get our return from Costco, and we were like, oh, that'd be funny if they thought that was that precious in this world, and we just left how we'd leave it at night anyway. And when Stacy comes up here and J-Tro's like, let me guess, you fell, right? When he sees her black eye, I always remember that was a real life line we heard this asshole guy telling some girl on a subway who had a black eye, and he wouldn't shut up. And we're like, dude, come on. And I was just like, well, that's an LWE line for sure. It's like LWE is just kind of me logging all of the worst things I've heard men say to, especially women, like ever, and just putting them in one place because there are a lot of assholes out there, and LWE kind of represents all of that for me. I always like the way this scene looks and scenes like this look because I find less is more with lighting a lot, and I find if you just have like there's literally one light on right now in this entire scene, and I think it just makes everything it gives everything so much more character. You get all these shadows and these cool looks on things. I think one of the big problems I see with lighting in movies these days is just like the joke I call it is like house lights on. It's that corporate look where everything just looks flat and so overlit. It looks nothing like what real life looks like at all. And there's just no character whatsoever or no like I don't know, art or style to it. And again, if you're doing an independent movie, like it's a lot cheaper for you to get, I think, a much more interesting look. Like you can be very experimental with just turning on one light, or let's say you want to shoot practically, just beef it up a little bit with one light. Like it's always, in my opinion, more interesting to look at than overly lit, and it's cheaper. I remember this was a particularly awkward scene to shoot because I think off camera here you have my dad watching for some reason, my sister's over there, my brother's behind the camera. It was like this whole family affair, and I was just like, God, can we just get at least one of my family members offset for this? And there was like, no, we gotta be here. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, give me some space here. But, you know, such is life when you're making a movie with your family. And coming up, when LWE rolls into this telephone booth, it's probably my favorite scene of the movie because it most accurately represents the energy and the intensity of the original shorts I made in high school. And it's just really fun for me to watch because telephone booths really just don't exist much in America anymore, and it just always takes me back to that time in my life where it's like when shit was extra tough, it's got to happen in the phone booth. And you know, kids now they won't know what true tough shit is like because they can't go in a phone booth and hash it out. And this scene just has a lot going on, cutting back and forth with Brian Goddard as he's, you know, getting a blowy from some random FP chick, which is actually just one of our makeup artists, which is quite funny. But the details in the background of the scene are out of control. Like, there's a baby carrier in the seat, as if there's a baby in the scene. I wish we would have had some sort of sound design for that, because just showing like how awful the sequence is. We were just like, how many boom boxes does my dad have in this property we can get back here to really paint this scene? I mean, I don't know if anyone grew up in a small white trash town, but this one particularly, we've all been to that house if you have. Like, it's gnarly. And I remember as scripted, this was supposed to be beatbox in here. You know, James DeBello doing this scene, but he just didn't want to do it for whatever reason. And which was fine with me because I think having it with, you know, Brian Goddard not being able to really speak, and it's like that Chewbacca scene really just brought it to life, and it couldn't have happened better. And I didn't write it that way, but that's just how it ended up on the day, and it was quite a happy accident. And now we have the infamous NIGGA, never ignorant, getting goals accomplished scene, which a lot of people like to give me flack about, showing that, you know, I'm so racist or that or the other thing, but I was like, guys, this was literally on the mountains full of white kids. This was their excuse for why they could say the N-word, because this is actually from Tupac, and Tupac came up with this slogan. I can't take credit for it. And so I was like, oh, of course, everyone knows that Tupac said this. Now people will get that this is a joke and we're making fun of these white guys. Nobody got it. And they thought, you know, they thought I was an asshole, and I was like, I'm making fun of the assholes. But anyway, that's this whole movie in a nutshell. Coming up on this finale of the movie was tough. I could tell I was kind of running out of gas at this point. I'm walking with a limp because my ankle's broken at that point. I'm shot listing the movie all the time. I'm telling the actors what to do. At this point, I feel like 1 or 2 extra days of shooting literally would have killed me. I was just like, it mirrored my character's journey, I think, to kind of be this beat up, and I'm like, this has to end now. So, you know, I was right where I needed to be. And this shirt was crazy because you actually have a picture of Stacy on there, and you never get to really read what it says, but it's like, I hot dog this bitch. And I was like, God, this guy's the worst. And he's kind of based on like this comparison of like, he's both Clubba Lang and Apollo Creed in this scene, because they came in, they're very flash whenever they come into the ring, and that was always Lee's thing. He wanted to have the big showmanship of those things, because we were big fans of the Rocky movies, I mean, obviously, growing up. And Fraser fucking Park there, written on Art Sue's chest, that's something, we used to just make shirts of that and go into town, which we really enjoyed. And then eventually I think they made like professional ones, but we used to just Sharpie it on the shirt and just go nuts, and we used to love that. And the I Heart FP shirt we made in this movie, actually this was the first one to be made, but then if you go up there now, there's actually like a religious sector up there at some of the churches where they have I Heart FP, and it's like Love God on the back or whatever, but they have those shirts, and you can generally get them for free if you go to Fiesta Days or whatever like that. If you're looking for some God propaganda about hearting FP, that's the spot to go, and they totally stole it from us. Yeah, I remember really having to fight to keep this national anthem in the movie. And, you know, as someone who, I used to play sports in high school, I always thought the national anthem was pretty ridiculous before a game. You sit there and you listen to it, and it was one of those things. And I liked having the characters be like, God, this is so fucking stupid. And I thought that was a funny joke, because it's kind of like me watching the movie, or back when I was at those games, just being like, can we just get on with this shit? And it was really fun. We definitely cut this sequence down, but I think it came across as a fun thing for the bad guys, just be like, get this show on the fucking road, like voice of the audience. I remember in these dance battle sequences, we didn't really have a lot of cameras. I think we might have had like 2, because we borrowed one or something. So you have to we do all 3 matches like as one take. We have the camera floating around, and we have one locked off, and you do it again from a slightly different angle, and you just do that a bunch of times, and then by the end of that, like it's a couple hours later, broken ankle, you're just beat up and tired. And what people don't realize, I think, about Dance Dance is it looks pretty silly, but it's kind of like you're sprinting in a weird way in place for minutes at a time doing these songs, and it just like, it really kind of beats the shit out of you, and you feel so silly, because you're like, I know how stupid I look, but I'm so exhausted. And, you know, this was back in our prime. I couldn't imagine, well, actually, I can't imagine doing this now. I did it recently for FP4, but it's not easy. I always love this line coming up from Nick Princeby from BLT saying, you know, you gotta dance to your mind, not your feet. Because I was always like, that is so ridiculous. And at that point, I always try to put myself in the mindset of somebody, like a hater watching this. You know, this is so stupid. Like, why is this movie so serious? And I'm like, it's obviously a comedy, guys. In what world would that line be in a serious movie? Like, come on. But, you know, sometimes they just don't get it, and you're just like holy hell, how do people not understand this movie is a joke? Every frame of this is a joke to me, but, you know, alas. It really helped in this final dance battle that Lee can actually play Dance Dance, or Beat Beat in this case, because I didn't have to do both sets of legs. That was a happy coincidence, especially for this final match, which we shot pretty late on in the movie. I think this was right before it went to our week of night shoots, so it was we were running out of gas. I think we had about 20 days to shoot this movie, which I think is probably more time than I've ever had to shoot any of my other movies. I'm always like, oh wow, 20 days, that's a lot, but you know, it really isn't when you're doing something this complex. And this match was fun, everything. This is J-Tro coming to win. We're like, what are we going to do for the final match? And I remember Tyler, our production designer, he was like, well, what about a cage match? And I don't like to write things that, like, you know, I'm like, I don't know, where the hell are we going to get a cage? He's like, well, you guys got some metal lying around down there from the old Mortal Kombat sets from back in the day. Let's weld up a cage and get to work. And I was like, all right, great. You know what, a weld? Do it. You're up. And then he also had, like, a counterweight that was a motorcycle that would pull it down. Like, Tyler was insane. Like, everything he would do would just always amplify everything, because you know, I'm always pretty afraid of doing things that I can't guarantee, but he could kind of guarantee just about everything if you gave him enough time. Like, we had this DJ booth that was just the front end of a truck that we found lying around on my dad's property, and my dad also had a forklift, and then Tyler was just like, well, what if we have the DJ booth on the forklift and it operates and goes up and down? I was like, that sounds great. I have no idea how to do that. You know, you leave it with Tyler for an afternoon, and all of a sudden you have a DJ booth that lifts off the ground for a cage match. And I was like, that is probably the coolest thing, one of my favorite little set pieces that I don't think gets enough play in the background there. That thing was amazing. I really like the music here and the cage match sequence. It's George Holdcroft. He did an awesome job in this. It took him like a year to score this movie, largely because he just didn't understand electronic music or techno or any of that, because he's like a classically trained pianist and all these things. So like I just give him like every techno CD I had in his car, and he would drive around with it, and I just kept trying to be like, this is techno, this is techno. And eventually he became one with it and made an amazing score. But it was interesting trying to like convince somebody who's so classically trained to like, okay, now you're going to do something that goes against everything you've ever known. And once we got there, it was amazing. Yeah, it was fun. In all the movies, we created the BBR, BP Revelation game screens in the background there. It always helps to have something for the actors to act to, and also just not have to deal with a green screen TV when you got a camera moving around. Always, not having to track something is quite nice to not have to do in your low-budget movie. But I always liked in the Dance Dance, the actual game, it's like the game announcer's just talking shit at you and all those kind of things. And I really wanted to amp it up with FP speech for the game. And as the movies go, that definitely cranks up a notch, because I like the idea that the game is kind of sentient itself. Where does it come from? How does it operate? Why is it the way it is? Who knows? Perhaps we'll get there someday in a future FP movie. Like, I never thought I would do 2 or 3 of these movies, let alone 4, so who knows how far we're going to go at some point. I love the FP, like, fight posters in the background, the ones back there of me and LWE, and there's also one of Beatro out there. Those were great. I loved doing those. That was a separate day of the shoot where we had to obviously take pictures of those photos and then get them printed up as poster size, which wasn't as easy to do back in those days as it is now, and then get them ready on the day. Now, this is funny because at some point in the shoot, my brother had a friend who was like, I got a slow-mo camera, you can use it now. Not for the earlier bit that we were shooting, but for this bit, the slow-mo camera was available, but it was only slow-mo in 720, so since the movie's 1080, like, everything gets kind of soft, but we're like, well, for this sort of sequence, everything can be soft and dreamy, we can make it work. But it was always funny, like, just the limitations of technology from then to now it's pretty staggering. It's crazy. I mean, a little DSLR could do all this in 8K now in slow-mo, which is crazy. Now, I knew early on that we wanted to have a shootout, but this was a hotly contested moment in the movie, and we were like, you know what? We have these guns, my dad has some blanks, let's just do it and see what happens. And we had a lot of fun with this of like, okay, so what do they go behind for cover? And obviously my favorite, but also it seems like a favorite of lots of people who watch these movies over the years, is BLT and his bulletproof toilet, which no matter how much it gets shot, nothing happens to it, and I absolutely love that. I guess the only thing we did wrong is we should have spray painted the toilet gold, but I don't think my dad would have let me, to show how impervious it was to gun blasts. And I love just having a shootout, because this is closer to, I think, what a shootout is in real life, where everyone shoots at each other and nobody hits a goddamn thing. It's that kind of, good guy with the gun rhetoric that's out there that, like, most people are terrible shots, and this kind of, for me, reflects that your average person cannot shoot to save their lives. And I love that that's how that got shown here. It's interesting seeing the foundation cleared out and empty, and you realize how much smaller that place is when it's not full of people. It's always wild. If you want to make something look big, just throw a bunch of people in it. Yeah, and here we've got a big explosion, because my dad had this Winnebago on the property he wanted to get rid of, and I was like, can we blow it up? And he loves doing explosions. And I was definitely probably a little bit closer to that thing than maybe I should have been. My dad was a bit tired that night. I remember his famous line, like, I was like, Dad, where's the safest place to stand? He's like, in your car on the way home. I'm like, well, I live here, so that doesn't help me. And anyway, that's making movies with your dad. Then we had to put like flame bars back there and have it burning the whole time to match the explosion. But yeah, I mean, it was a full-on gas bomb, which was pretty crazy. I haven't done any of those in movies since, because they can be pretty dangerous, so I like to do dust explosions. And here we go. We decided after the point in the beginning of the movie that Art would no longer be able to drive the car because he couldn't, so I had to take the helm here and do the driving from here on out. Now, with these car chase scenes, we had no way of doing, like, there's no, like, process trailers or anything like that, so we have no idea what they're doing in the car. The car's just strapped to the hood, and they're driving around. So basically with Lee, you have to give him some directions, and see what happens, and he took over there and like did his scenes with him and Stacy, and then same thing I did with Art in my car, and we kind of just were rogue in these scenes because, you know, there's no video village, there's no anything in these sort of movies. It's just, well, I think we got it, moving on. And then we just have one giant light that just blasts down the street for our lighting, and here's your car chase, just driving back and forth down the main street. Neither fast nor furious in the end here. And God, Lee is such a, you just fucking hate this guy for how he treats Stacy and every other woman or just anyone in the movie the whole time. And that's something where I like, one thing I will give older movies is that you hated bad guys in movies, so you wanted to see them just get the shit kicked out of them. And something you don't really see a lot in movies anymore. Bad guys can't be quite as bad, and I like to have the cautionary tale of like, this person's bad, don't be like him, because if you're like him, you're gonna get your ass kicked by the good guy and kicked out of town. Yeah, but it's an ancient bygone film type. Now, Lee and I choreographed and rehearsed this fight like the night of before in the barn with like kind of some pads, or at least like some furniture pads or something, before we did this fight, and then going out to do it on the night like in an actual like, you know, rundown gas station like on concrete with no pads was quite an event. We got pretty beat up in this fight scene because, you know, it's late, you're tired, you haven't practiced it enough, you try to be as safe as you can, but you also want to get as close to hitting the other person as you can to make it look real, and, you know, some things happen. And was happy with how it turned out in the end because we had no time to shoot it. We only had like 2 or 3 takes to just run through a couple of different angles and see what happened. And yeah, we had to cut away there because I didn't want to just actually beat him in with a car door because that doesn't feel pleasant. There's no faking that. God, in the background there's actually, if you look at it, there's a $1 symbol on whenever the last time this gas station operated. It was in the $1 range, and if you know anything about American gas prices, that is a long time ago. $1, my goodness. Yeah, this scene, it definitely, I don't know, kind of had a permit, maybe didn't have a permit, but one thing I can tell you about making independent movies is it's always easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. If you're, you know, when the cops come, which they did in this scene at some point, luckily it was not while BLT was brandishing a real firearm. You know, you can kind of get out of things like, hey, we're some kids making movies. Like, I can't really get away with that anymore because I definitely look older now. But I remember back in the day, that was a lot like, oh man, we're in high school just making a movie and seeing what happens. Like, oh, that's cool. But yeah, just ask for forgiveness. Just do it. See what happens. The older you get, they don't like that excuse as much. But while you're young, take advantage of it. Run with it. Yeah, and I think in this scene here, we, as written, there was like beatbox and Brian Goddard's character were supposed to be stuffed in the trunk, and there was a whole moment with them like showing like, yeah, we got him, we kicked him all out of town, we're riding him out, that sort of thing. And you know, they weren't available, we couldn't get them that day or what have you, and it's another one of those things where you just have to rewrite it and keep going. Like, you just like, that's where BLT is like, ah, yeah, 2 bitches in the trunk, great, that's all we need. It's actually better for the out of the movie anyway. But you got to be loose when you're making these low budget movies. Like, when those things happen, there's always an answer, there's always a way around it. It's usually just changing a quick piece of dialogue or something, and you can find your way out. Like, trying to shoot movies as chronologically ordered as you can. So, like, for instance, when I got smacked by Lee in the eyebrow there with my elbow, and you can see it in some of the close-ups bleeding, that's not makeup, that's real, and that's as much as we can do with makeup to kind of hide it. So luckily it was towards the end of the movie, so I didn't have to hide it for very long, and I could just kind of go home and convalesce with all my injuries. Yeah, again, rolling with the punches. This whole end fight sequence was supposed to be outside of Don's Liquor, which, you know, thematically makes a lot more sense because, you know, you fight the bad guy at his home turf and his lair, and you take back the booze, and et cetera, et cetera. But I remember some of the, you know, finger quote Hollywood producer types on this movie decided they would go to Don's Liquor to try to get, you know, the okay to shoot there without me, who was actually grew up there in the town and knew people, and they totally screwed us over from getting the location. And I was like, why did you guys do that without me? And they're like, we got this, kid. And I was like, well, you don't. And then they didn't. And we had to scramble and find an alternative gas station in town, which there aren't many. I thought there was only one. Turns out there was one that was like a derelict gas station down the street, thank God, that one of our friends happened to know of. But yeah, it's just, when you have if you're shooting on location somewhere and you have someone who knows people in town, always have them go and ask for permission to do things. The second you have a Hollywood type go in there, they're going to close their doors or just rack the price up tenfold. Like, it's just how it is. Don't think, you know, they can sniff out used car salesmen 1,000 miles away in these small towns. It's wild here. Due to climate change, this pond no longer exists in Fraser Park. It was there as long as I can remember, as long as anyone could remember. And between the shooting of FP1, FP2, it actually did go dry due to climate change, and had to rewrite some things for FP2 because of that. And I was like, wow, I can't believe the darkness actually came to Fraser Park due to climate change. And here we have the only outsourced visual effects shot in the film, which are these ducks flying away in a V, just because at the time I didn't know how to do that. Today I can do that in my sleep. But yeah, wow, there it is, end of the movie. We have this was inspired by, if you've seen the ending of Strange Days, this is kind of the same deal. Songs inspired by that song, these pullouts the same, all the same deal. Like, you know, you can go through the whole movie and be like, this scene's like that, this movie's like that. And then in future FP movies, I kind of took that out and started just making them our own. Well, it's been a wild ride watching this movie again for the first time in a while. I hope anything I said here was beneficial, just telling you, I guess, a bunch of what not to do on your first movie if you can, and maybe what to do as well. Hopefully it helped. If you ever need anything else, go ahead and reach out to me on my social medias. I'm more than happy to answer questions whenever you have them. And just thanks for being here. Thanks for watching this, and stay after the credits just a little bit, and I'll catch you on the next FP commentaries. Good day, mates.